So these are the countries of Honduras and El Salvador on a map. Now, despite what you'd think, the smaller El Salvador in the 1960s has a population of 3.7 million to Honduras' 2.6 million. Now, this was a problem because El Salvador was getting kind of full, and there was not enough land for everyone to farm on. So about 300,000 El Salvadorans hopped on over to Honduras. Now, the huge American fruit companies in Honduras didn't like this because they saw these immigrants as competition. So they told the very corrupt military leader of Honduras to do something about it. And when you're a very corrupt Central American military leader, you do what the fruit companies say. So he starts deporting families that had literally lived on Honduran land for generations, and then eggs on Hondurans to start attacking the remaining Salvadorans. Which they do, because nationalism. The Salvadoran government protested this because they were pretty full and could not handle everyone returning.
No, you can't just beat up and deport a lot of citizens.
Haha, deportation truck, go vroom.
Now things seemed bad, but you know what could make them worse? Central America's favorite thing, football. Qualifications for the 1970 World Cup in Mexico were underway, and both countries finished top in their groups. So each went to face each other in the semifinals, set in the Honduran capital of Tegucigalpa. Things went about as well as you can expect. The night before the game, a crowd of drunk Hondurans went outside the Salvadorans' hotel and harassed them a bunch. The game the next day also saw the Salvadorans beat 1-0. Violence erupted between fans, and a young Salvadoran girl shot herself in despair. So the Salvadoran government did the only logical thing and turned her into a national hero, which was basically like putting more gasoline onto the fire. The next week, the Honduran team had to travel to their game in the Salvadoran capital of San Salvador. There was a repeat of what happened outside the hotel again, and during the game, instead of raising the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a white flag. El Salvador won the game 3-0. But what this meant was that both teams had to play again in Mexico City. El Salvador won that match 3-2, which meant they would play in the final qualification. In response, Honduras turned up the harassed El Salvadoran settlers up to 11, and began burning down their homes and sending even more of them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran president blamed the Honduran government for a genocide, and severed diplomatic ties. 2 weeks later, on July 14th, the Salvadorans declared war and began an invasion. They sent their air force to begin bombing Honduras' airfields in a surprise attack so they couldn't respond to the invasion. But the Hondurans quickly got everything up and running again, and the Hondurans then began bombing the Salvadoran supply lines. But the Salvadorans were still able initially to maintain a fairly quick advance nearing the Honduran capital, but eventually began to get bogged down after supplies ran short. Meanwhile, the Organization of American States asked them to stop, and they initially said no. But then after realizing that their supply lines were destroyed, they finally agreed. The war itself only lasted about 4 days, but it took another 2 weeks and a threat of sanctions from the OAS for the Salvadorans to pull back their troops. About 6,000 died and 15,000 more were injured, all mostly Honduran civilians. The war ended up tanking both countries' economies, and since El Salvador could not provide for all the returning immigrants, it helped cause a civil war a few years later. There are still some borders disputes caused by the war, which still continue to this day. After all that, when El Salvador went to the World Cup in Mexico, they lost every match. So yeah, there was literally no point to the war, and neither country got anything out of this. Thanks to patrons Emerson Salmerio Rubio, NoFlu, Skylar Weston, and Zyma.